Hello and welcome to the 9th CTIS walk-in clinic. My name is Roxana Spulber and I'm a Change Management Officer at EMA. Let me start with some housekeeping rules. We will be using Slido to collect questions. And here is how to use Slido. Go to slido.do and enter the code on the screen, Clinic 9, or scan the QR code on the screen. The passcode and the QR code will be visible on all the presented slides for ease of access. You can ask your questions there and give a thumbs up to any question you want to see answered. We will answer the most popular question first, so please ensure the thumbs up, you use the thumbs up feature. And also because we have asked you to send questions in advance, we will address the questions sent previous to the starting of the event first. If the video screen is blurry or difficult to see, please read the instructions in the gray box underneath the video on the event page. There you can find a link to watch the live broadcast on full screen. In full screen mode, you can increase the video quality by clicking the HD button on the bottom right of the screen and choosing the 720p or the 1080p setting. You can find more information about CTIS on various places on our site, and some of them are listed here. So we have the City Highlights newsletter, the City Training and Support page. For guidance on CTR interpretation, you can consult the UDRALEX Volume 10, and also we advise to consult our online modular training program. I would like now to introduce our expert. So today we have Noémie Manon, Principal Scientific Administrator and leader of the Operation Workstream for the Clinical Trial Information System, enabling application of the Clinical Trial Regulation, and Ana Rodriguez Sanchez Beato, our CTIS Deputy Program Manager that has been involved in the implementation of the Clinical Trial Regulation and the development of CTIS by providing a business perspective. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you very much for this introduction, Roxana. So I think now we can proceed to answer the questions. And while we putting the Slido on the screen, we will then start this question and answer session. And today we have the pleasure, Anna and I, to do that today together and to answer your questions. So very welcome to the session.
Thank you. You should see on the screen right now the questions. I think the first three questions are for Anna. Just a second, something happened. So, Anna, if you could address the first question. The member states have requested an unblinded document to be provided as a substantial amendment. Blinded sponsor or CRO staff have CT admin roles to facilitate the submission of the application or amendments. How can we provide the unblinded document via CTIS without unblinding sponsor or CRO staff?
Okay, thank you, Rosanna, and good afternoon to everyone. Regarding this question, it's not clear in this question which is the unblinded document we are talking about, but if I assume it's related to the quality part, so because it's the part in the system that, let's say, has a specific role that have access to that information, meaning the quality IMPD or the quality scientific advice or RFIs related to quality, because only the CT admin, obviously, because this is one of the super user in the system, and also the quality IMPD preparer are the ones that have access to that information. So therefore, in the case, this is the documents we are talking about related to quality. I think it's difficult because if you gave the CT admin role, those users will have access. So the only role that is able to submit application without having access to the quality information is the application submitter. The application submitter role can submit the application, can check that the information is there. For the quality part, can check that something has been uploaded, but will not have access to the content of the document, but will be aware that the document has been posted there, so will be in a position to submit the application knowing that a documentation has been added there and assuming that the quality MPD preparer or whoever was the CT admin uploaded there the right documentation. So the only possibility is to assign the application submitter role to those users so they can still have a look at the application, change that application, and the only part that they will not have access is to the quality part. So otherwise, you need to work through contractual arrangements to ensure that there is no disclosure of information.
Thank you. The next question is related to the QA of the CTR, and it reads, would it be possible to include two synopses, a longer synopsis in the protocol itself, 10-12 pages approximately, to be used by physicians as they usually do, and a brief synopsis, 2 pages, in a separate document to comply with the Q&A?
Yeah. Okay, from the system perspective, for sure is possible because under the protocol synopsis, you have an upload document functionality and you can add more than one document. So you could add these 2 documents. What I cannot answer, because this is not a CTIS related, is if this would be acceptable by the member state that are responsible for the evaluation. And in that case, my recommendation is that you liaise with the RMS. But from the system perspective, this is possible.
Great, thank you. And I think the next one is also
For me.
yours. I am assigned as a CT admin with a specific trial scope. While creating a substantial modification, the option to create it was grayed out, and I was unable to do so. The EMA service desk told me that this could only be created by CT admin with all trials scope. Is it possible to know the timelines to have this issue fixed?
Okay, probably here I would need to have more information because the answer from the help desk is correct whenever the trial was created through the organization-centric approach. In the organization-centric approach, it's mandatory to have a sponsor admin registered here at EMA through the Identity Access Management system. And in this case, only a CT admin with a scope of trials cannot only create initial application, but is the only one for subsequent application, is the only role on top, and also the application submitter who scope of trial who can create subsequent applications. So this is not a bug if the trial we are talking about here was created via organization-centric approach. Because if that is the case, if you have a scope or trial, you are CT admin scope trial, you cannot do it. It has to be created. So it doesn't mean that then you cannot populate it. So but the creation of the application, it has to be by the CT admin with the scope or trial. And then you as a CT admin can continue and add all the documents in part 1, part 2, etc. But what you cannot do is, let's say, the initiation of the creation of that substantial modification. However, if your clinical trial was created via CT-centric, then the CT-centric is, it can be only by a CT admin with a scope-specific trial, because in the CT-centric approach, we don't have this concept of a scopal trial. So then it should be possible. So I'm not sure what is the situation of the trial we are talking about. I'm not aware that there is a bug specifically in the case of the CT-centric. So I understand that this particular case relates to a trial that was created via organization-centric, and therefore the answer from the service desk is correct. This was designed in this way. So only CT admin and application submitter with the scope or trials can create a subsequent application. And for the initial, it has to be only a CT admin with a scope or trials.
Thank you, Anna. And I think the next two are still for you. So the next one is, if an RFI request for a submitted document to be updated, where should the tracked changes version of the document should be uploaded? In the RFI response or in the specific document placeholder, example, protocol section?
I presume when you talk about the specific placeholder, you mean in the dossier? No. In the RFI, at the start of the RFI, there is a specific placeholder to upload the track changes, so where changes have been included in the dossier. So is there where you have a placeholder there, and in fact, if you make changes in the dossier, then you need to upload this document. It's mandatory to upload this document, because if you forget, you will see that you will not be able to proceed and submit the RFI response. So pay attention to this, because if you are not very familiarized with the system, sometimes happen that you may change the dossier, you don't attach this document, and then you reply on your question and you try to submit, and you are prevented for submitting the RFI response. And the reason is because you forgot to upload in this placeholder this track change document. But this is in the RFI response, it's at the start. There is a section for general documents, and is there where you have to upload this particular document.
Thank you. And the next one is a question that we received a lot of time. It's about the size of the documents to be uploaded. And it says, the size of the documents currently uploaded should not exceed 10 megabytes. Are there any updates when this limitation will be improved?
Okay, for this particular issue, I would like to inform you that this is in the backlog. We have already a backlog of issues that were identified during the different phases of the acceptance testing of the system. And obviously this is one of those. Now we are working with our product owners that involve some member of the sponsor community and CROs community to prioritize the backlog, to identify what can do first. And in fact, this is one of the items that is in the backlog. And the priorities that we are going from 5 to 11. And in fact, this ticket is in the backlog with the scoring of 7. So as you can imagine, is not the highest priority, because now we are trying to address those that are number 5, because are related to more legal requirement or more, let's say, blocking issues. And therefore, this is the pipeline. It has given a priority 7, which is not bad priority, but it's not something that we are going to do in a very short term. So, but hopefully in medium term, this will be resolved.
Thank you. And I think now, I'm sorry. This question is for Noemi. The part 1 and part 2 assessment reports and decision letter do not mention all final approved documents. How can a list with all the approved documents be obtained?
I think, Rosanna, this was assigned to me as well.
Okay, apologies. Yep.
I can probably take this one. For this one, probably I would like to remind you how it works in the system. So if you log in the system and you search for the trial, and then you navigate within the trial, you will end in the landing page. In the summary of the trial, it will be the landing page when you navigate through the trial you have obtained in the search result. And next to the summary, you have another tab that is called full trial information. And in this tab is where you are expected to have the latest authorized versions in its member state, and it's from there where you can obtain that information, because at the bottom you will have a list of documents that have been authorized, and there you will have the information that you are looking for. So please remember, you have in the full trial information the latest authorized version.
Thank you. And I think, again, Anna, this is for you. It's under the section third parties in CTIS. Do we need to enlist all third parties involved? For example, CRO, consultancies, laboratories?
Well, what I can say, and this is the expectation from the inspectors. So I think this information is very important for the inspectors, for the GCP inspector, because if they want to inspect third-party vendors, they will need to have this information, and the way where they will look for it is in this section. So, and is how it can be searched easily. So therefore, yes, I think you should enter this information.
Thank you. The next question is about part 2, assessment RFI, that requires a change in application for member state concern A, and another part 2 RFI needing a change in application as well, coming in a week later from for MSCB. How can the RFI be submitted if the change application button is clicked already for MSCA before MSCB RFI comes in? Button not visible.
So for this case scenario, I must say, please, I would say that you need to raise a ticket, because this is not correct. This is not a correct behavior. You should be able to answer part 2 RFIs independently of each other, because those are managed through the independent assessment by the MSC. So therefore, you should have the ability to respond to those independently. You should have the ability to change the application for that particular MSC, particular part 2 of that MSC, in parallel, without any conflict at all between those RFIs. So if such a behavior is actually noticed in the system, please do raise a ticket to the service desk, as this is obviously, I must say, a matter that we're not aware of, unless Anna, you are. But I don't think we've flagged this one up during our daily call. So please do so, because we will need to follow up on that.
Thank you, Naomi. The next one is also for you. Are there EMA guidance on how to best to ensure information redacted in core documents does not result in an RFI solely because the RMS is not in agreement with the information redacted?
So it's I mean, obviously it could well be a consideration or a question that the member state or the RMS may have in relation to the redaction of the documents that the sponsor would have provided. However, I think at this point in time we need to think that our member states are certainly focusing on the assessment of the dossier. They are not going to review the redaction in a very deep way at all. I think this is why we have these guidelines coming up. It's currently in draft, and I think Anna will comment on that later on when we can expect it to be finalized. But this is why we want the sponsors to have the support of this guidance, and we wouldn't want the member state to dedicate any of the assessment time revising or reviewing the redaction of the core documents.
Thank you, Noemi. And the next one about the Q&A update, it's also for you. Regarding Q&A update 171, where it is not acceptable to refer to a trial authorized under the CTD. Is this only specific to trials with the same IMP and the same sponsor? How does this impact the ability to cross-reference for investigator-sponsored studies?
So as you can see under the latest Q&A published by the European Commission, we have got some clarification on questions that have been posed in the past. So on this one, particularly, this is in reference to a trial with the same IMP. So in case, I think the reference can still be made, obviously, you can still refer to a past trial that you may have conducted, for sure, yourself or another sponsor, because this is acceptable according to the regulation. However, obviously, you would not be able to cross-refer it in the event of wanting to share clinical trial documentation. So we could take the example of the IMPD. If an IMPD was indeed submitted for a study under the CTD, under the Clinical Trial Directive, and you're then submitting a new study under the clinical trial regulation, you would not be able to cross-refer to the past trial for referencing the IMPD. That would not be acceptable according to the clarification provided by the European Commission. So obviously you can still refer to other trials in the event of sharing information about or therapeutic area. That is still possible, but not within, I think, to clarify, not in order to cross-refer to other documents that may not be provided in this current clinical trial application dossier.
Thank you, Noemi. And I think you still have one more. According to the CTR, the RMS has a limited number of days after the sponsor has responded to an RFI. However, the dates in the timetable within CTIS are not updated after an RFI has been set up or answered. Is it possible to change this?
So with this question, we are referring obviously to the predicted timelines that are presented for each and every application when we have the sponsor responding to an RFI earlier than 12 days. If we are taking the scenario of a part 1 or a part 2, what we notice, and this is correct, and the requester here is correct, the predicted timelines of the submission of the conclusion to part 1 or to part 2, that particular due date, predicted due date, is not brought forward. No, it is not. Currently, obviously, the workflow under which the member state works is affected. If the sponsor is responding earlier than the 12 days, that means that as soon as the response is received, the member states have the task assess RFI response that is triggered within CTIS. Then obviously that particular task is triggered earlier, and they then have to assess that response earlier. Now, I think this question from the requester, so certainly from the sponsor, is then why is the conclusion due date to part 1 and part 2 not let's say, shorten? CTIS obviously is built in order to accommodate the regulation and the timelines that are presented in that regulation. What we have to envisage is that we could still have the member states issuing another RFI within this timeline. This second RFI would not extend further than what is required by the regulation. However, we still need to give the flexibility to the member states to raise this additional RFI potentially, and for the sponsor to provide the documents in order to make sure that the assessment can go smoothly. And this is what is that's how CTIS has been built. Obviously, it's not because the due date is not shortened that the member states will not then act quicker and then certainly issue their conclusion earlier. They can still do it. However, it is correct that the timelines are not recalculated in such a way in proviso of the response to the RFI provided by the sponsor earlier. I think this is a concept you will see. Also, this is also the case for an additional MSc application, and especially for the additional MSc application, we know that there is no possibility for the member state to actually validate the Part 2 dossier, because that is not a concept in the clinical trial regulation. Therefore, there is no such task. However, it's well possible that the additional MSc member state, additional MSc, may raise an RFI very early on in the process. And obviously, we would not want this very early RFI, what that may just be to clarify one of the documents, to shorten that timeline, because they still need to assess, obviously. So I think this is how we need to understand the setup in the system. And currently, clearly, there is no intention to change this, just to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Noemi. The next question is about the EU CT number. And it says, the EU CT number always has 2 zeros in the end. Do these zeros change within the submissions, or is this number always the same and able to clearly identify a trial? Do the 00 need to be added to the protocol as well? I think this was also for you, Noemi.
I think that's an interesting question, because we actually did discuss it with the assessors recently. The way it's presented in CTIS, the 00 is definitely was to accommodate the resubmission and enabling the EU CT number to be kept as it was in the very first submission. I think the way now it's presented on the UI, on the user interface, on the public website is very much like, oh, it seems like those 2 digits at the end are very much part of the trial number. However, that was not the intention and the original request. I think it's just a design way. We certainly want the member states to know that it's a resubmission, and that is the way to see it, because then as soon as there's a resubmission, it will appear as 01 or 02, etc. So that was the intention, and that's definitely why it was built in such a way. Now, the way it's actually rendered on the user interface and in a public website is probably not the best, because we all ask the same question. Then do we need to have those 2 digits on the protocol documentation? My understanding is no, it's not necessarily required to have it, but it's obviously important for the member state to know that it's a resubmission. So you will need to clearly convey that information on the cover letter. You will also clearly document this on how you're actually managing this numbering, because obviously the trial number has to go on the labeling. If it's a resubmission, would we want this 01 to be there? You're probably going to use exactly the same product, so why having to relabel again? I think this is very much the way forward that was supported by the member state. However, what I can say at this point in time is that this is not recorded in any of the best practices by the CTFG or by the European Commission. So what I would suggest is that we agree on this comment, as I said. We certainly need to push that forward with the European Commission, and we can certainly take the task to do this at the agency.
Thank you, Noemi. The next question is about the anonymization of documents, and this is for you, Anna. The anonymization of documents for publication is a time-consuming task, especially if documents need to be corrected due to an RFI. Would it be possible to perform the anonymization after the final approval?
The answer is no. It's not possible because it is mandatory when you upload a document, you have to upload the version for publication and also the not for publication. And obviously the version for publication is the one that is expected to be redacted. So, and in redacting, I mean not only personal data, but also potential confidential information in case you want to redact the CCI, although for the CCI you can apply also the deferrals and reduce the burden. So, and I want to make this clear because the deferrals were included in the system in order to prevent the burdensome of redacting the CCI in the documents. But obviously personal data will need always to be redacted. Also, although it's not expected that, or we would recommend that to try to create documents without personal data on those documents. But yes, as I said, it's not possible to do it after the final approval. You need to do it when you prepare your application.
Thank you, Anna. This next one is also for you. Please confirm transition trials do not require site suitability statements to be collected after transition is authorized unless for any reason the site address would change. That would imply impact on the site suitability. Site suitability is not required for all sites after transitions by default. So,
okay. Here, what I can say is that my recommendation is that you look at the question and answer from the Commission, the question 11.6. So where it explains there clearly that obviously at the time of the transition, you may not have certain documents, so you are not expected to upload those. But your dossier needs to comply with the regulation at the first opportunity, meaning if you submit a substantial modification application for Part 1, you are expected to upload those Part 1 documents that were missing when you transition the trial to the new system. And the same for Part 2, which is the case we are talking now. So clearly it's stated in the Q&A that you are expected also to upload all the Part 2 documents that you did not provide at the time of the transition of the trial. So my understanding is therefore that this document should be there. But again, I'm referring to a Q&A that was prepared by the clinical trial expert group at the Commission, and therefore if you have further questions, then you need to liaise with them.
thank you, Anna. This is for Noemi. Previous walk-in clinic confirmed that document versions are updated with the date of the resubmission. This cannot occur as this will be problematic for sponsors TMF or site ISFs. A protocol dated January 1st, resubmitted on January 30th, should not have a document date of January 30th. This is not the accurate document date.
So we need to make a clarification here. The ability to resubmit obviously exists in the system, in the CTIS system. When the sponsor resubmit an application, it is not the document version that is then reset to the day of the creation of the dossier. It is the actual, let's say, it's the metadata that correspond to the document date in the system, but it is not the document version. When a document is uploaded by the sponsor the user needs to upload the documents and need to indicate several metadata. The first one is the document type, the document title, and then there is a possibility for the sponsor to include the document version, and this is a version date that is manually entered, that can be in the past, obviously, that can never be in the future. But there is also a version of the document that is a manual version that can be 1A, X2, or whatever the version of this document is. And this is the metadata provided by the sponsor. Now we also have two additional fields that are read-only for the sponsor. One is the document version in the system. So the first one, the document is actually uploaded to that placeholder. It will be version 1. And then there is also an upload date. And this upload date is the date when the actual document is provided to the system. So what we clarified is that when there is a resubmission, this particular upload date is then obviously modified to the date of the creation of the new application. As the version of the document for this one, I'm not aware that it's changed, and as well as the version provided by the sponsor is also not changed. So I hope that clarifies the previous comment that was made.
Thank you, Naomi. This next question is for Anna. The new CV template contains the EUCT number. Can this be removed, as this will require trial-specific CVs to be created? High admin burden for site and sponsor. Thank you.
Okay, again, for this particular question, is like in the previous one. I think these templates have been prepared by the clinical trial expert group at the Commission, and therefore, if you have concerns with this template, perhaps you can ensure that you contact the Commission to make them aware of your concerns and justify those concerns. I presume because an investigator may work with a trial from different sponsor organization, this can be updated with more than one number. I don't think the CV need to be specific for a particular trial. So personally, I don't see the problem to have more than EU numbers, but in any case, if you have concerns, again, I think this template has been prepared by the Commission, so you need to contact them and express your concerns.
Thank you, Anna. The next question is about the submission under the directive. When we start submitting a trial under in the EU under the directive, but we cannot finish submitting all EU countries before the end of January 2023, can we still proceed with the submission of the new EU countries under the directive after end of January 2023?
So the simple answer to this one is, I'm afraid it's a no. Any new clinical trial application needs to be provided to CTIS. This is important to point that out. The end of January 2023 is the anniversary of the first transition year, and after that, I'm afraid sponsors should not provide to member states any clinical trial application under the clinical trial directive. any new submission should be done to CTIS.
Thank you, Noemi. The next one is for Anna. When will the draft guidance document on how to approach the protection of personal data and commercially confidential information in documents uploaded and published in the clinical trial information system will be published?
Okay, this the intention is to have it published in the first quarter of 2023. As you know, there was in September, there was a workshop to discuss the comments from the public consultation, and the team is working to include those comments in the document, and therefore probably it will not be finalized until the first quarter of 2023.
Thank you, Anna. I think this one is for you, Noemi. If an expert consulting is added to the evaluation of part 1, does this have any effect on the evaluation of part 2, example, on timelines?
So there are particular scenarios when having the ability for the RMS to call on an expert is defined in the regulation. This is enabled for the evaluation of the part 1. And it's up to 50 days that this evaluation can be extended. However, this will have no effect at all on the assessment due date for the part 2. I'm afraid this increase of the assessment timelines for the part 1 is not reflected for the part 2, and therefore those two are being done independently of each other. Although some of us might have comments and say, oh, but the assessment of part 1 may have an effect on the informed consent in part 2. Yes, possibly. But those scenarios obviously will need to be looked at, I think, for those particular cases. But clearly, as per the regulation, there's no impact on the assessment of part 2, and it's not even possible today to extend the evaluation of the part 2. Huh?
Thank you, Noemi. We are very close to the end of this event. I will leave it up to you if you want to take any of these questions from the screen to reply.
Yes, we could. Yeah.
Okay.
I can take quickly the last one, Rosanna.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
Can you share any updates on when a template for compliance with regulation will be available? Please, I think this template is already published in the HYDRALES volume 10. If you go to the chapter 1, is the last, in the chapter 1, you have all the templates that the clinical trial expert group at the commission have prepared. And the last document is, in fact, this template for compliance with the regulations. So you have it already publicly available in the HYDRALES volume 10, chapter 1.
So we'll take the next one here. So on the transition trial and affected trials, I think we've already answered that question, because clearly in CTIS, we can only cross-refer to study documents for studies that are in CTIS. And if the documentation has been provided under the CTD, it's not possible to cross-refer. That's been clarified by the European Commission. And on the next one is also clearly explained also in the transparency guidance. The main characteristic notification intermediate data analysis summary of results cannot be deferred for pediatric trials. That's correct. But we clarified and we confirmed that the protocol, the subject information sheet, the IB, the IMPD, and even the responses to the RFI can be deferred for a pediatric trial.
Okay, thank you so much for those answers. And thank you to the participants for attending this session. Please bear in mind that on the EMA events page and on our support and training page, you have the links to the previous sessions for the CTIS walk-in clinics and all the other CTIS related events. And if you want to see what was answered during those sessions, you can certainly consult the recordings. As you know, starting the event on the 20th of September, we have opened the Q&A channel prior to the start of the event. We will continue to do so for the remainder of the year for all our events. The post-event survey will be open after the closing of the event on Slido. So please stay a few more moments on Slido, and you can share your satisfaction with the event. The recording of this session will be available on the EMA webpage shortly after the event. The questions that you have asked will be used for training materials. And I will also like to remind you of some events that we are having in the future. So the next session for the CTIS walk-in clinic will take place on the 15th of November. This month, we will have another OMS troubleshooting session for CTIS users, where you can ask your questions related to OMS and how to navigate that system. And this event takes place on the 19th of October. And on the 23rd of November, we have the next bite-sized talk on notification, which is actually a part 2. So we hope actually that you have enjoyed this CTIS walk-in clinic, and we are looking forward to hearing your feedback in the post-event survey. Thank you and have a lovely afternoon.